Okay, Rachel, working at the animal shelter in the city, and again, lots of images of animals. And what I really love about this series is, you've kind of broken them down a little bit into smaller little bits in little sections so that the viewer sees parts of the animal that might not necessarily be the first or most obvious thing that you would see, especially when you're looking at the dog kennel. So this image here, I love how we were kind of focusing in on the wrinkles of this dog and especially this area within his neck there. It almost reminds me of one of those Edward Weston images of the pepper that kind of focuses in almost on the texture of the pepper rather than the pepper itself. And certainly in this case, you're almost doing the same thing, but with the rolls or the wrinkles in the dog's skin. So really like that a lot. And we talked about this image in the previous module. Really like it a lot. Maybe we want to have the paw entirely in the image, but nonetheless still a great image. And again, you're taking these sort of little slices, these little vignettes of the different parts of the animals that I think are visually interesting and not necessarily things that we'd probably notice right off the bat as a viewer. So really nice on that. Like the composition in here, although I'm not sure what happened in your resizing. You definitely have resized this incorrectly. We want our resolution typically to be 300 pixels per inch and 7 inches in the longest direction here. So you can see the reason for that is, the size that you have it now, it just gets way too pixelated here. So we don't get a really good sense of the quality of the image here. Typically I'd like to be able to read this sign in the background, and when we zoom in here, you can see that it pretty much just goes off into to random pixels there. Great shot here, and we sort of get that sense of chaos of this lady. She's sort of trying to manage the one little kitten there, and the other kitten is kind of wandering around, and it looks like there's a little plate of food alongside there, and the log or the record or whatever is going on. So one of my favorite shots of the group, because I think it really says something not only about the place, but the efforts of the people that work there and how they manage sort of all of these different pets and all this activity that's going on around them. So really like this image a lot. And I think we talked about a little bit about not having too many images of animals behind bars, but certainly there are kennels there, and some of the dogs and cats are behind bars, so that certainly is part of our narrative, so it's okay to include those. I don't want to get too much of a diet of animals behind bars, but love the way you shot this sort of from a position that's looking down at the dog, so the dog's eyes become the central area of the photograph, and the viewer really kind of goes in and connects with that dog and with its eyes there. I'm just looking at your image here and want to look at your exposure, and your exposure is definitely off here. So you have an ISO of 64. So typically we use an ISO for really a low ISO value, for situations where we have really bright light, like an outside sunny day. Indoors, we typically would want to be working with an ISO of 400 or 800. Even 1600 is not unheard of with that. That being said, if you had moved this ISO up to, let's say 400, you could have gotten your shutter setting up to 1/60th of a second. And that way it would have eliminated a little bit of what looks like kind of handshake that's going on here. In other words, the camera's just moving slightly up and down as you're releasing the shutter there. So it's not as entirely sharp as it should be. So pay attention to that, and really recognize that, about 1/60th of a second is that danger zone where you're going to start to get some movement either from your subject or movement from what we call camera shake, essentially your hand shaking as you're pressing the shutter release button. So pay attention to that as you work towards your final project. Interesting image, the little play area outside. I especially like how you framed it and given us something for our eye to kind of land on here in the photograph. Not sure whether you had any say into whether some of the animals could be out in the yard playing, but I almost wonder whether having some animals out here might add a little bit of interest or a little bit of value to that part of the photograph. And some more shots of the workers there. Again, a really neat shot. I love how sort of we've got this interaction between her and the dog, and then sort of whatever's catching the dog's attention inside of there also is pretty fascinating to me. I also really like the texture here. We can kind of see, it looks like we can almost see the ribs of this dog. So we can see that, this guy's probably not had a lot to eat, and the efforts of the volunteers and the people that work there are just, helping this dog get back to health. So I like that a lot. Just one little minor note here. I think we could drop the frame here a little bit more, just so we're not cutting her off at the ankles in this shot. And then a really neat picture of the cat here, especially how it's sort of moving its paw, whether it's licking its paw, but again, sort of a little bit of interesting gesture there. Again, it looks like you're pretty slow shuttered here because you're starting to get some blurring, and again, an exposure of 1/30th of a second, and I have no idea why you're using an ISO that's this low. You really got to move this ISO value up higher, which is going to allow you to use a faster shutter setting. That's really a fundamental skill here in this class, so you've got to master that moving forward into the next couple of assignments here. And another interesting image of a dog. Again, we've got to show some stuff behind bars, and I like the fact that you sort of are almost not showing his eyes here, so there's a little bit of mystery, a little bit of intrigue. It makes us, wonder about this dog, who the dog is, where the dog may have come from, and why it's there. So I like that a lot. And then probably my favorite shot of the group, where we've got some interesting activity with the kitten here, and really what's almost like sort of a flat, desaturated background is contrasted up against the really brightly saturated red feathers, which is kind of capturing the attention of the little kitten. Although I am going to say here, again, we've got really slow shutter settings, and that's why your images are not sharp. Again, we've got lots of movement here and not a lot of sharpness in the cat's face, which I think we really need in images like this. What's interesting, the thing that's not moving here is the carpet, and the carpet is really in sharp focus. Look at the difference between the focus there and the focus in the cat, and again, it comes back to the cat's probably moving really fast, and the shutter setting is just not catching up to the speed of the cat to freeze it up. So again, be aware of those ISO values, and the old rule of thumb: low ISO outside and sunny, higher ISO inside and low light. So all in all, pretty good shot here at your service learning project. Do really want you to review those technical foundational skills, because I do think that your shutter consistently through these series of images is way too slow for what you're trying to to shoot here and what you're trying to accomplish. So work on that, practice it, and hopefully you can master it for that final project. Good luck.